Now the international break is finally coming to a close, and that can only mean one thing: FPL is back this week. And in today's video we're going to be running through my team selection ahead of game week 8, and of course giving you all the key data and tools to make the best decisions this game week. Now before we dive into today's video, I just want to say that we are trying to hit 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and it is only possible with your guys' help. So if you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be making sure to like, comment and subscribe. Of course, we're going to start off first with the goals and clean sheet odds. Obviously the Rob T FPL stuff isn't out. I'm actually having to film this on a Tuesday evening rather than usually the Wednesday evening slot. However, we do have the ones from Fantasy Football Hub, and as we can see here, these are probably the individual fixtures we should be looking to target this game week. So obviously Manchester City fancied the highest probability of a clean sheet, and of course the best projected goals for this game week, and that is probably a game I would be looking at in terms of my captaincy for this week as well. Interestingly, Liverpool's projected goals are extremely high against Chelsea. I would imagine they probably would have been kind of one of the mid-ranking teams, but it does seem like the Fantasy Football Hub model does back them to do quite well. Forest with a 36% chance of a clean sheet, those looking for a potential Konza replacement as well. Aina and I think it's Mikalenkovic could be absolutely fantastic replacements with a high probability of a clean sheet and decent fixtures for the next three as well following on from that. In terms of the other fixtures, nothing kind of really stand out for me. I think the early kickoff probably should have better projected goals, some of the way that West Ham have defended so far this season as well. So the likes of Dominic Solanke, Maddison and Johnson definitely should be on people's radars as well. Moving on to kind of more longer term data, let's of course take a look at the 11 of fire models. If you want to go and check this out for yourself, I will leave a link in the description. This is projected goals over the next 6 game weeks, should I say. As you can see here, Manchester City top, obviously that matchday 9 fixture against Southampton definitely dragging them through, and I do think maybe when that one does pass, it will be interesting to see how they do line up, because after matchday 12 their fixtures really do start to tail off, and I feel a lot of people at that point potentially could be looking at ditching Erling Haaland and maybe looking to find other solutions within the games. Liverpool's are actually surprisingly strong, apart from matchday 9 where of course they're away at the Emirates. That is going to be naturally a difficult fixture. However, outside of that, matchday 8, matchday 10, matchday 11 and matchday 12 are looking superb as well. So maybe keeping hold of the Mohamed Salahs, the Trents, the Jotas, the Diazes potentially could be worth a little bit of consideration with strong projected goals during these kind of fixtures. Spurs obviously there for the next 4, and again, like I said, Son, Kulusevski, Maddison, Johnson, all these players are definitely going to be on our radar for this week, and potentially one of them could be looking to join our club as well. Of course, naturally, there was going to be a drop-off in terms of those Arsenal fixtures. They've had their good run, so we are going to start to see them drop away. And I do feel if I had the choice right now between Bukayo Saka and Cole Palmer, I would be looking after this week to deviate towards Cole Palmer. I do think, you know, on paper it is like 2 greys with Manchester United and Newcastle. However, for me personally, I do believe that Chelsea will win both of those games, and that United game potentially could be Ten Hag's last one as well. Moving on to clean sheet data from 11 of 5. Again, it's kind of the same kind of batch of teams towards that top end. Arsenal, City and Liverpool all fancy to do quite well over the next few weeks for clean sheets, so definitely worth holding on to the Arsenal players in defence for me, it does feel like. And of course those Manchester City ones as well with some decent fixtures. Rico Lewis and maybe Gavardio worth some consideration. Liverpool, there is a slight drop off as we can see here, especially over the next 2, and it maybe could be worth reconsidering potentially having Trent Alexander-Arnold and maybe doing a little bit of manoeuvring around and maybe allocating those funds into midfield, or of course into the forward positions as well. United, we spoke about this good fixture run they're going to go on obviously from matchday 8 onwards, so definitely worth some investment there. I feel from a defensive perspective, maybe if you're on a wild card this week, Onana could be a really decent shout. He has been one of the top scoring goalkeepers within the game, and his clean sheets kind of look decent across the next few, and his save potential as well. I think he might be second for goals prevented so far in the Premier League. So again, having another pretty decent season. And then we've got kind of a cluster of kind of mid-table teams where I definitely feel you could pick up some cheaper players. Of course, we are looking at Brentford, Forest, Everton, and Fulham for me in that kind of bracket. Wolves as well, as we can see around match day 10, do start to pick up, and that is the point I feel that we want to obviously start jumping onto Wolves assets. So of course we've got Nori, Cunha, and other players will start to develop as we kind of, you know, microscope in a little bit and kind of analyze their players a little bit closer as we all start to potentially go and bring them in. Moving on, let's take a look in terms of captaincy for this week. So we're going to look at projected points and, of course, anytime returns. I don't think it's any real shock, as we saw with the fixtures. There wasn't, for me, any kind of outstanding or clear and obvious other captains outside of Erling Haaland. I think despite the blanks, he still is the best captaincy option for this week. And I actually spoke about this on FPL Raptors podcast, FPL Therapy. I will leave a link to that in the description as well if you want to go and check it out. An absolutely amazing experience. So big thank you to Raptor for letting me go on and obviously discuss what I was kind of going through with Haaland and my thought process on captaincy for this week. But yeah, for me, I still believe that Haaland is the best captain. As you can see here, 83% chance of an anytime return, 61% chance of scoring at any point as well. It is the highest on this list. Now, interestingly, this was back-to-back games for Erling Haaland where he didn't have a big chance. He's only managed to do that 7 times in the past 2 seasons. Both of those as well, you know, kind of coming back to back. It's looking a little bit dicey, and people are starting to potentially get cold feet on Erling Haaland. And I understand the process why. And one of the main points I highlighted in the podcast with Ross was the fact that for me, I feel that Haaland's been going through a lot. Obviously, there's other significant factors. The impact of KDB, Phil Foden not kind of being at the races as well. City have lacked creativity, and we've seen that with their expected goals as well. It's the first time that they've lost back-to-back games under Pep Guardiola in terms of expected goals. And for me, Haaland has been going through a lot, right? He's just found out that he's going to become a dad. That puts an immense amount of pressure on people. Like, you've got to think, like, what am I going to do with this child? How's my life going to change? You know, there's lots that goes into that. And of course, he did lose a very, very close family friend as well. Now, all of this stuff actually will affect people. Like, I think that's sometimes what people forget, that this game isn't just all about numbers. Sometimes the mental side of the game, you know, these are people at the end of the day. And we see it so many times. I think Marcus Rashford is the prime example of a player that is a purple patch player. When the confidence is high, when he's in the right mood, he will absolutely smash it and be one of the best players in the Premier League. When he's not there, we see the levels drop. And I do think, you know, Haaland at times, we've said he's a robot. He's got that ability, that mental ability as well, to take his game to the next level. But obviously a lot has been happening in his life personally over the past few months. And I do feel it would have had a bearing on his outcomes. But I do think Pep would have been working extremely well over the international break to kind of squash in terms of kind of that the lack of creativity that City have shown over the past few weeks. So I think they will still absolutely go and destroy Wolves, and I think Pep will have kind of been tinkering away all international break and not really getting any rest in. Again, if we look to the predicted points, it doesn't actually have Erling Haaland at top right now. If we look to some of the other models as well, FPL Review, Fantasy Football Fix, Draft Hound, they have Haaland. It's only the Fantasy Football Hub one that actually has Mohamed Salah coming out on top, and it is only by 0.1 points, sorry. And I actually think still going with Haaland is the correct decision. I feel like a lot of the majority of people will be looking at him for captaincy this week. And again, if he absolutely pops off, which he very, very easily could do against Wolves, who have conceded the most goals so far this season, I do feel like he is still the best captain option for me personally going into Game Week 8. But I think this graph is interesting because if you are potentially looking at keeping somebody like Mohamed Salah for this week and maybe making that switch to Cole Palmer next week, then this definitely suggests that that is a fully sensible move to go and do. The predicted points back Mohamed Salah, as we saw with the 11-5 projected goals as well. Decent for this week and decent long term as well. So maybe Salah and some of the other Liverpool attackers might not be sells. But let me know what you think of that down in the comments section. And let's move on to my team and, of course, my transfer targets for this game week. Now, of course, let's dive into my team selection. First off, starting with our goalkeeper, it is going to be David Raya. I don't think anything kind of else really needs to be said on this one. I have been a little bit disappointed with, of course, Arsenal's recent clean sheets or lack thereof, but hopefully Raya can be a very, very solid goalkeeper, and I think he will be, even with the Arsenal fixtures getting a little bit more difficult, as we saw with the 11-5 data. They're still fancy to do exceptionally well in terms of those clean sheets. However, I do think, the saves will start to rack up a little bit and hopefully gets himself back into some of those bonus points conversations as well. In terms of the back line, as we can see, it's a little bit hiddly-diddly this week, isn't it? We've got two players flagged at the moment, Mykolenko and Konza. We haven't received an update from Everton or Sean Dyche themselves around Mykolenko and his actual fitness. Nothing's really been said since the game that he missed out on. It was obviously being reported from Ukrainian media outlets that he had sustained some sort of injury and was going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks. Obviously, we've had the international break and he could actually be back for this Ipswich game, so I'm a little bit reluctant to sell him unless we get told it is a more severe injury, and obviously he's going to spend a little bit more time out. Konza, that looked like a hamstring, so that's probably going to be 4 to 6 weeks or maybe even 8 weeks, and I do feel, Aston Villa's fixtures are starting to turn away, and there was always going to be one replacement, and it was, of course, going to be Aït-Nouri for Ezri Konza, but if I do need to play a defender this week, it does leave me in a little bit of a tricky position because obviously Aït-Nouri is at home against Manchester City and I don't expect Wolves to keep a clean sheet in that fixture, but he could come away with an attacking return. I get in on early as well on Aït-Nouri because I do feel like he has the potential to have decent price rises, but we will talk a little bit more about him in my transfer targets section. Robertson is going to be an issue for this side, and I do feel longer term he is going to be, looking to kind of leave this side. If not this week, probably going to be next week. I do feel like downgrading him to somebody like a Rico Lewis or again an Aït-Nouri or potentially another 4.5 million. Interestingly, we've actually seen more clean sheets this season so far and of course less goals scored across the Premier League as well, so maybe Big at the Back could be making a return, but for now I think Robertson does have to depart the club with him not being a nailed or solid player. Liverpool as well also have the hardest run in terms of that FDR rating coming up, so I do feel it's probably time to potentially shift on the Liverpool defenders. Aina, as we saw, Forest are really fancied on the 11-5 model at the start as well. We saw with the the model from Fantasy Football Hub as well, that they are also fancied to do exceptionally well for a clean sheet this week, so I'm very happy to have Aina. Moving on into the midfield, I don't think that midfield really needs to change, to be honest. Mbeumo, Salah, Rodgers and Saka, I'm pretty happy with all of those guys in the side for this week as well. I don't think it's going to be the easiest fixture for, of course, Morgan Rodgers away at Fulham. They've actually been pretty decent, and Mbeumo will obviously go and score in the first minute, and Mohamed Salah, as we saw in the last section, one of the top players for predicted points for this game week, so I'm very happy to have him as a potential player for the side as well, and starting to become a little bit of a differential. So if he can get back to how we started the season, could be a great player to hold and have. Of course, Bukayo Saka as well was flagged, but it does look like from all accounts we are seeing that he is going to be fine and available for this Bournemouth fixture. However, if things do change, we do need to find that money, then of course it would be Robertson down to a Rico Lewis, and of course we would upgrade Bukayo Saka to Cole Palmer for this, I would say, mid-ish fixture run. I could also be tempted to just do Saka to Son as well because it's a decent fixture for Spurs, but I think with him coming back from a more longer term injury, then maybe that might not be the move and he might not see kind of, decent minutes across the next few as well. But as a whole, I'm pretty happy with that midfield as things stand. Moving on to the forward line, and this is where things get tasty this week. Calvert-Lewin and Jamie Vardy both have appetising fixtures with Ipswich away and Southampton away. I am very frustrated, of course, owning these two guys over the past few weeks. They've not been doing the business, especially Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He has had some chances, but just not really delivering. And I do feel we potentially might have to find a solution for either of these guys because I can't keep having two blanking forwards. I'm really tempted with Raul Jimenez as a potential option. I don't think it's the easiest fixture this week, but Fulham have looked really good this week and have been one of the most improved sides from not only an attacking standpoint, but also a defensive standpoint this season. So I'd be very happy to have him in the side as well. And then, of course, Erling Haaland. Like I said, I did speak in length about Erling Haaland over on the FPL Therapy podcast. So if you do want to go and check that out, I will leave a link in the description. But for me, Erling Haaland still represents the best captaincy option. We saw it with the anytime percentage chance of scoring. Of course, there has been a drop-off in performance, as we can see from this data set shown here. The big chances in terms of his XG are not there. They're just not there. And like I said, it's the first time this season that he's had back-to-back games where he's not had, no big chances in 2 games. So it is a little bit of a concern. But for me, looking at the other options, there isn't a clear and obvious other captaincy. So I think I might as well just stick with Haaland for the next 2. Again, once those game weeks do pass, then he's still blanking and City are still not creating plenty of opportunities, then I do feel it opens the door up for some conversations to go without Erling Haaland, because yet again, he is at this very, very pricey point. And this is the argument I made at the start of the season, that if he goes on these long runs where he doesn't pick up points, and you're obviously ploughing so much money, and most weeks going to be ploughing captaincy into him as well, you are going to be on the back foot in this game, and it does open the door up to potentially play the game a little bit more different. Let's go and take a look at some of my transfer targets then. Obviously, Cole Palmer we did speak about briefly in the last section. That, of course, is if Bukayo Saka is out. If not, it probably would be a move next week to Cole Palmer from Bukayo Saka. We do have free transfers. I should have already said that. The plan at the moment, if everybody is fit and fine, would be to roll again and to take 4 into the following week as well. Again, at that point, I feel we've got so many options to change this side, depending on form, depending on players, and of course what happens post-international break. Another player that could come into the side is Brennan Johnson. If we were to drop Robertson down to an 8 Nori or to a Rico Lewis, it would free up a lot of funds, and I would like to upgrade that Sharda position. That move just hasn't really worked out. Unfortunately, he is playing some minutes as the forward, but he's just not good enough from an FPL perspective and not putting in enough kind of, I would say, goal-scoring opportunities for me to justify keeping him in the side. I think it's pretty much a dead spot, and I would rather get a 4.5 or upgrade it somebody like Brendan Johnson, who has been on fire and obviously catching the eye. My only concern with him is he's already not playing 90 minutes, and now Spurs have got a big fixture congestion coming up with obviously Europa League, Carabao Cup as well continuing, and of course we are seeing players return from injury as well. So that does mean that I think he is going to potentially see some minutes out or be kind of, dropped completely from the side. So that's my only concern with him, and I have cooled my interest a little bit earlier from where I was in kind of the differentials video that we did over the international break. And then finally, of course, it is going to be the cheap defenders kind of bracket, if you like. Again, me and Ross on the FPL Therapy podcast spoke in length about all of these players. But for me, my personal favourites, of course, are 8 Nori. Big fan of Rico Lewis, and I think Leif Davis as well could be a decent shout with Everton and Leicester. The only reason I'm a little bit hesitant on going for Leif Davis this week, of course, is because I have Calvert-Lewin. Next week I have Brian Mbeumo. The week after I'd have Jamie Vardy. So every single week there, I would be wanting somebody to score against Rico Lewis. So that's why, not Rico Lewis, Leif Davis. So that's why he's not going to come into the side. But Rico Lewis could be a great shout. Obviously, I will expect some rotation, but the positions he's getting himself into are phenomenal and definitely worth some considerations. Of course, 8 Nori as well is a very similar player, but the problem with him is, of course, they do face City at home, so I wouldn't be expecting a clean sheet. It's probably going to be a 1 or 2 pointer. We very easily could play Greaves, but again, I would be going up against Dominic Calvert-Lewin yet again and kind of maybe contradicting myself with my team lineup there. Also, 8 Nori is on 3 yellow cards, so if he did pick one up in the City game, I would be walking on a tightrope, and again, would probably find myself being a little bit shortcomed and having to find obviously other alternatives for defender picks. That was my team selection ahead of game week 8. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Of course, if you've got any questions about your team as well, get them in, as we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can. But thank you very much for watching today, ladies and gentlemen, and good luck in game week 8.